June 13th, 2016. Judith Therianos, a 52-year-old single mother from Maine, was in the Tampa, Florida area to visit an ailing friend and to vacation. While there, she met Timothy Johnson, a 25-year-old drifter. Therianos was apparently a very free spirit and clearly thought this stranger, young enough to be her son, would make for a good time. So she drove him around while she worked temporary jobs in order to earn enough money to return to her native Maine. According to the affidavit, Johnson and Therianos went and had sex in a wooded lot out in the county. At some point, Therianos changed her mind and wanted Johnson to stop, but Johnson strangled her until she was unconscious. He then raped her while she was passed out, but that's when things got really bad. Next, Johnson took a rock and bashed her skull in. Having murdered Therianos, Johnson then took her debit card and went to have a meal at a nearby Waffle House. Then he bought a 4-pack of beer. Next, he returned to where Therianos' dead body laid in the woods and raped her corpse. He then poured rubbing alcohol on the body in a clumsy effort to destroy any evidence. On March 23rd, while Johnson was in jail on unrelated charges, he confessed his bestial crime to a couple of other inmates. Therianos' body, however, wouldn't be located until April 7th, almost a month after the rape murder. But there's something we need to make sure is understood first. At the time Johnson made his confession, he wasn't in jail for the murder of Therianos. In fact, he wasn't even in jail for a crime committed after the Therianos murder. He was there because of an assault charge that took place before he murdered Therianos. You can probably tell the pattern by now. You see, on January 17th of this year, Timothy Johnson was arrested on 2 counts of aggravated assault stemming from a home invasion he'd committed where he threatened 2 people with a large kitchen knife. Naturally, that's a felony, but apparently nobody told the state's attorney that, because on February 19th, a month later, while the case was still pending, Johnson was released from the Land O'Lakes Detention Center without bail. That's how the justice system works for white skin privilege. You literally have a get-out-of-jail-free card called white skin. Now, the state's attorney, trying to think of a way to excuse away this blatant example of white privilege, began blaming everyone but himself and blamed everything except white privilege. First, he tried to claim that they had to let Johnson go without bail because witnesses had not responded to the state's attorney's request for testimony in a timely enough manner. But what the state's attorney doesn't mention was that the witnesses did come forward on February 25th, only a few days after Johnson's release, and the charges were officially filed. This was 2 weeks before Johnson even met Therianos, plenty of time to prevent the murder. But even without the witnesses, the state's attorney's office is not bound by law to release a suspect if charges aren't filed in a given time frame. That certainly wasn't the case in Los Angeles, where an innocent black man, Robert Walker, was held in jail by the LAPD for 2 years without evidence and without being formally charged because the police were eager to show that they were doing something about a string of robberies in the area. A court ruled that the LAPD was legally liable for damages because they deliberately denied Walker his day in court for 2 years. And these same things have happened in New York, Chicago, and Houston. DAs nationwide know that they can file one motion after the next to drag out the legal proceedings and by doing so impose an arbitrary prison sentence on someone without their even being brought to trial. But all of a sudden, this state's attorney thinks that 30 days in jail is too much of a legal risk. You know damned well that if Timothy Johnson had been black, they wouldn't have let him go. Or if they had, he definitely would have been required to post some sort of bail. Witnesses be damned. This state's attorney didn't have to let him go. He wanted to let this white thug go. The authorities simply didn't feel that Johnson's freedom should have been infringed upon simply because he committed a couple of felonies. So they put him back on the loose, and a couple of weeks later, Judith Therianos crossed his path. Again, we have yet another case of a white thug who could have been stopped before he killed, but because we have a color-coded system of injustice that gives white males legal immunity from any and all crimes, his felonies were not merely downgraded, they were overlooked altogether, and he was released from jail without so much as a by your leave. And now you have an innocent woman dead, at the hands of another white person. And in none of these news stories is this called white-on-white crime. In no case do any of the white politicians call it white-on-white crime. In no case do any of the white police call it white-on-white crime. The spokesman for the family doesn't call it that either. And that's the reason why we're going to continue to see more of this in the future. The self-inflicted genocide of white-on-white crime will continue because there's a conspiracy of silence in the white community. Saving face is far more important than saving their own lives.